Good morning, guys. So welcome to Dirtpatcheaven. Today I am in my summer kitchen and I want to show you how to wash wool. I'm a few minutes early because a lot of times people are not getting notifications that we are doing a show. Let's see if I can turn that off. A lot of people are not getting notifications that we're actually live. And so I'm kind of excited today to start a little bit early. Now, the most important thing I think to know about washing wool is something that we all learn the hard way the first time. And the reason I wanted to start in this spot is because I'm sending this big, gorgeous lamb's fleece, that's a Romney lamb's fleece, to Catherine because she's going to start dyeing. And I don't want her to have any confusion when she gets it, or to waste any of her precious water. She's in New Mexico, and so she has to be very, very careful with her water usage, and she's on a septic, and you have to be very, very careful with wool when you're on a septic, because when you wash wool, if you don't wash it the way that I'm going to show you, you're going to end up with lanolin. Oh, what's happening? Oh, I got to check on a kitty. Okay. All right. No dead kitties. All right. Sorry, guys. If we have struggling kittens, we have to check. So, if you do not wash your wool, your raw fleece correctly, you end up with grease. If it's mohair, it's grease. If it's wool, it's lanolin that ends up in your pipes. Even if you don't have a septic, it ends up in your pipes and it messes things up. Hey, Sandra. Hey, Susie. I thought I saw Bobby too. Hey, guys. So I want to show you how to do it. The reason to do it in small batches is that, for one thing, you can get the water out of your house because you can just take the pot out and dump it underneath a tree or out in your driveway or something like that. If you do it in, one of the things that people really like to do is do it in their bathtub. And when I first started, I did it in my bathtub, but it's very difficult to get that water out of your house. And it's such a big amount of wool that it's very, very difficult to dry your wool, because you have this maybe 10-pound fleece that now, how do you get it out of your house? How do you get it dry? And you're dripping water and you've got it in buckets. So instead, what I like to do is just the amount of wool that I can process on my combs in one sitting. And the reason for that is just because you learn. As you do this, you learn how to do it better. And if you have any vegetable matter in it, you can see that at the beginning, when you're first working with your fleece, you can see that it has vegetable matter in it, and you can decide what to do with your combs. You can decide if you ever want to buy that wool ever again. If you do decide still to wash in your bathtub, make sure to put a strainer, one of those little strainers, in your bathtub to catch vegetable matter. It's just such a bad idea to put it in your bathtub. This is a Romney fleece, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And we are testing it out right now. I'm testing on my end. Catherine is testing on her end to see if this is a grower that we want to offer in our Etsy store, to be able to offer people this gorgeous fleece. This is unwashed. This is unwashed. It is coated. And it's significantly less expensive than Natalie. I love to buy wool from Natalie because I adore her and she turns out a fantastic product. But I don't like super short fleece that likes to maybe felt a little bit. And I don't like super long fleece because I'm not really into art yarn at this point. I love to make sock yarn. I love to make hat yarn. And Romney, which is a medium length, medium fineness wool, is fantastic for everything utilitarian. If you want to make a sweater or socks or gloves or a hat, Romney is soft, but it's strong. It's shiny, but it's not, sometimes shiny fibers can be a little bit coarse because they're more like hair. This one has shine to it, but it's very soft, very tough. Hey, Kristen. We are back in the Idaho homestead. This is my summer kitchen in the Idaho homestead. Well, I don't know, maybe you can't see. I have water boiling on my little propane stove, and I'm going to show you how to wash the wool. So that's kind of the thinking behind all of this is, I don't want you to damage your septic. I don't want you to damage your pipe. And I want you to have every time you work with your fleece to be a learning experience. If you wash your fleece all at once and you do it wrong, then you have a ruined fleece. If you wash it in small batches, for one thing, you save on your expensive things like soap, and it lets you learn in the process. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I do use Natalie over at Namaste Farms. I do use her Dirty Rotten Bastard soap. And she also has a soap, and I think I do have a link for her. I should see if I can find it, because I haven't put it up in a long time. She also has what is it called? Wash and Dye, which is a soap that when you use it, it is going to set your dyes. So you don't use this when you're just washing something that's really dirty. What you do instead is you use the Dirty Rotten Bastard, and especially for mohair. It's very good for mohair. And so you don't want to be doing a huge batch. It would take 2 bottles of this to do a really dirty fleece, and then the fleece probably wouldn't be as clean as it could be. You just learn so much by doing it in a batch. So I have warm water, not hot water. I have a 5-gallon drum of water here, all set to go, because I'm doing this off-grid. I wanted to show you how to use as little water as possible. It'll probably take maybe 8 gallons to wash what I want to wash today. Hey Darlene, how are you? It's good to see you. Can you guys see pretty well? Can you see my bowls? So I have water boiling here, and the reason for that is that instead of going back and forth to the house and filling up on hot water that's going to be cooling very quickly, what I want to do instead is I have warm water. I have warm water in my bowls, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my boiling water that's still going, and I'm going to pour it in until they're the same temperature. But first, before that, I'm going to take my wash water, and I'm going to put the boiling water in until it's where I want it. I'm going to put the soap in, and then I'm going to let it sit for several minutes, okay? And then I'm going to add the boiling water to my rinse water only when I'm ready to rinse. And that way, I'm conserving on my water, I'm conserving on my fuel. Hey Sheila, good to see you. So the purpose of all this is so that it's a learning process that doesn't cost you too much. If you can source a good fleece that just needs to be run through your combs a couple times. Oh, that cat worries me. We have new kittens.
I'm trying to get straw out of its mouth. It has
Okay, so go squirt a little bit of that tea tree oil on its chin. Make sure you're not squirting it in its mouth. It'll make it sick. But if you could not torture the cat right next to the house. I know you're trying to help him, but not right next to the house. People will call PETA on me. All right, so these are the combs, and if you can get good fleece that don't have wool break is caused when sheep are not getting enough food or they're physically stressed for some reason. If you have a fleece where the actual lock breaks apart in the middle or it feels brittle, that's wool break. These work well on healthy wool, really well. Otherwise, whenever you work with that wool, it's going to break. Hey Daniel, how are you? So these are called wool combs. They're Valkyrie. I do not use those paddle flat combs because they don't actually clean the wool. They leave the vegetable matter in the wool, and it makes for knobbly, it makes homespun. And the reason homespun had a bad name back in the day was because it was rough, it was itchy, and it was not fun to wear. If you use the combs, then you're making worsted, and it's fantastic. You can get vegetable matter out. You can get, sometimes sheep have a bug or two on their wool. It'll pull that out. It'll pull out manure. It pulls all that out. Oh, Daniel said long sleeves. It's 100 there. Yeah, I have a sweater on. It was cold this morning when we got up. All right, so hopefully you guys can see. I hope you guys can see. I worried that maybe the conversation is making it. Is that easier? Can you see better now? All right, so hopefully you can see. So I've got this one here. This one is going to be my wash water because it's bigger. So, all right, you can hear that? I'll turn this so you can see. This is my little propane stove. I'm going to turn it off because it doesn't need to be on. And because I don't always use this stove, I'm also going to turn off my propane. But I'm good to go now. So I'm going to put in a little bit of soap. Hopefully you guys can see good enough. I'm going to put in a little bit of soap. And I'm going to agitate it to make sure it's actually in the water pretty good. And what I'm going to hope is that I don't break my pitcher getting my my boiling water out. Alright, so I've got my boiling water, and I'm going to pour it in here until I can barely keep my hand in. And that's pretty hot. So, that's nice and hot. One thing to remember, if you're going to run these through combs, which most of this, if you want to do a nice woolen, this is such nice wool that you could just spin it from the lock and not comb it. So it really depends. How you wash this really is going to make a difference in how you spin it, or vice versa. Okay? So this one is really clean. It's been coated, and so it would be really easy to spin from the lock. And if you're going to put it on the combs back here, you want to keep the lock structure, you want it to keep its integrity. So what you would want to do when you load up a comb, I'll grab one and show you, is you want to make sure that the lock, you can see how that was all grown in one place on the animal. You want, when you're combing, that's how you're putting it on. You're not taking a jumble of wool and putting it on, although you can do that, but it's not the way that it's meant to be. I'm keeping the integrity of these locks intact. Do you see that? And so you want to keep those locks intact in the fleece when you're washing it. And if you have a very greasy fleece, you do want to wash it before you put it through your combs, because otherwise the grease, the lanolin, will make it so that you can't get your fleece clean. You can't get it open. So that's ready. I'm going to go ahead and let it soak. If this was really, really dirty, I would let it soak until the water starts to cool down. Once the water starts to cool down, what you're in danger of is having it start to felt. And what that means is it latches onto each other and then it locks in. When you go from hot to cold or cold to hot quickly, and if you have any agitation, that's when you get felting. So one reason I'm not going to agitate this is I want the locks to retain their integrity, but I do want to make sure that the water got fully in. And even now I've got a little bit of, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that, but I've got, the water has started to turn a little yellow, a little brown. And don't jump the gun on this. Even though this water is cooling down, the minute that I'm ready to rinse, all I have to do is take some of my boiling water, put it in here so that the two temperatures with your hand, you're going to check and make sure they match. You're going to strain this, and then you're going to put it in your rinse. Kaya? Are you getting the rabbit hutch taken apart? All right, is that what you're doing? Okay, good girl. So, I wanted to talk about the difference between different wools and how you clean them, okay? So, first off, wool has lanolin in it, and fine wool breeds have more lanolin than coarse wool breeds. And so if you have something that's a merino, it's going to have a lot more grease than if you have a Hare sheep, and it's going to have a lot more grease in it than a Romney will. My understanding is that that keeps it from matting. The lanolin itself keeps it from matting in nature. And then mohair, which is closer to hair than wool maybe, it just has a much different texture. It has a lot of shine to it, and I love, love, love mohair. I don't like super long mohair because I still want to be able to put it through my combs, and I want to be able to turn it into something traditional. If you get something that's like that long, it's very, very hard to get it clean and to use it for something besides doll hair. So this is my ideal length for mohair. and I spent a lot on it. I think I spent like $30 a pound, so it's very expensive. Again, the reason why we're trying to source growers that we can get a less expensive but superior fleece. And a lot of times the way you do that is you find a private farmer and you buy all their fleece. It's what Natalie does. She doesn't just grow all of her own fleece, she also buys it, and we think we found somebody, so I'm really excited about that. They're only a source for Romney at this point, but I'm hoping I can find somebody that grows mohair too. So with mohair, what you get is you get grease. It's not lanolin, it's grease, and it's worse with bucks. A mohair is a goat. And they have this lovely kinky, curly, I prefer the kinky to the curly. I don't like it when it corkscrews because it's hard to spin. And for this one, you have to have extremely hot water, and you cannot let it cool at all. The wash water itself can't cool. You have to dump it, because otherwise as it cools, the grease will settle back down on the mohair. But it's absolutely gorgeous. And kid mohair is fun, but I find it a little difficult to spin because it's short and it's even more slippery than regular mohair. All right, the next one is alpaca. I do not wash alpaca. I do not buy alpaca that is super dirty, because dirty meaning huge amounts of vegetable matter or sticky stuff or anything in it, because the reason is that alpacas dust bath like a chicken. And you don't have to wash their fleece, but you do have to put it on something and bounce it and get all that dust out. And then it's super, super easy to process. But you do want a good quality alpaca, and I don't wash it. There's no point to washing it. There's a lot of point to tumbling it or putting it on like a screen door and bouncing it to let all the dirt come out. And I always process it on my drum carter, not on my combs, because it is so stinking fast on a drum carter. Let's see. The other advice I would give is, if you're going to be washing a fleece that is white or that is gray, make sure that you dye it at the same time. Does that make sense? If you're going to dye a fleece, have that dyeing be part of the washing process, because otherwise you have to wait days, maybe a week and a half, depending on your climate. You have to wait for it to dry again. And so instead, it makes a lot more sense. Wash it, rinse it, stick it in the dye pot, and have it be a process. The other thing is, when you're dyeing, do not use utensils from your kitchen. I have specific tools that I use only for dyeing. Now, as far as washing the fleece, like, I can use my kitchen bowls to wash the fleece. I'm fine with that. But with the dyeing, we use organic dyes, but you still, it would be like using the same bowls to wash your laundry that you use to prepare a salad. It's still not food. So when we use the, okay, let me stop for a second. You can use this in your washer to dye cotton, or you could use this in your sink to dye wool, but it's toxic. And the reason they can sell this in the grocery store is because it's already been diluted down, so the powder isn't getting up in your face and in your lungs. But Erin Brockovich, the movie about the whole community that was being poisoned by the water, they used chrome. It was a chrome or a dye or a leather plant there in that town. And the toxic thing in conventional acid dyes is chrome. So you don't want that going into your water system. You don't probably want to be wearing it on your skin too badly, even though it is conventionally what we wear. So the one we carry in the Etsy store is called Greener Shades, and it does not have chrome in it. It is an acid dye, but it does not have those toxic chemicals in it. So if you're sensitive, or if you're just worried about putting chrome in your water, that's why we use the organic ones. So I'm going to move on, and this has taken quite a bit of lanolin out. So I'm going to go ahead and add my hot water to my rinse batch. Again, don't go, if you're off grid, you have cold water that you add hot water to. You don't just go and fill up your bowl with warm water every time. Instead you use cold water and you put your hot water in, and that way you're not using up all your fuel to heat your water. And make sure to keep the lid on. Now, if I was normally doing this, I would want to drain it. So let's see what I can do. I kind of want to do a dual batch right here because they're both so very, very clean. So there's my wool. And I want to squeeze all the water out that I can. I do have my strainer here, and usually I use a strainer. But now I'm going to double check, are they the same temperature? They're very, very close. This is a little bit warmer. I'm going to put it in and let it soak. Okay. For this one, I'm so tempted just to wash some of this mohair, and I don't know if it's a good idea or not, if I'm kind of getting in over my head. I always want to save water, and so sometimes it's very difficult for me to look at it and be like, no, throw the water out, it'll be okay. When instead all I want to do is be like, no, I need to save it. So I'm going to get some more hot water because I'm going to give in to my prepper tendencies. And if you are going to do dyeing, it is best to do it outside because of ventilation. I haven't always followed that credo because I was not educated enough about it to know that there were things in dyes that I wanted to be careful at. And even with these organic dyes, you don't really want them in your lungs any more than you'd want baking soda in your lungs. And when you're using the dyes, they do get up into the air. And so if you have the choice, do it outside. We'll see how this goes, how much of this I want to use. I am such a funny person. They did a very nice job on this. They have actually stacked it in here according to locks. And I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave that open because my hands were a little wet and I don't want moisture in there. I think what I'm going to do, if you're going to be dyeing things and you want vibrant colors, you want to start with a white fleece and just know that it's going to bleed. If you want something that shows variegation in color, you want to over dye a gray fleece because the white fibers will pick up more vibrantly the color. The dark colors won't pick it up as much, but they'll pick up a hint of it, and so it'll give this really deep look when you finish spinning because you'll have a variation of colors throughout the whole thing depending on individual fibers instead of chunks. It's very amazing. It just looks gorgeous. So I got this gray one for dyeing to give it a vibrant, fun color. And what I'm doing right now is I'm letting my stove cool down a little bit, my water in the stove cool down a little bit because I'm going to dye this and show you guys how it works. Pardon me. So this I'm going to let sit for a minute. It's always best to let it sit. It is very hot. Oh, and if you want a dark color like a black or a brown and you want it to be a little bit darker than the fleece that you bought, what you want to do is you want to over dye a brown or a black fleece. Most fleeces are not going to run true through the whole fleece to be a really deep color, so it is okay to over dye it. But you're wasting dye if you try to dye a white fleece black because it's going to bleed later. If you want a truer deep dark color, you want to start with a true deep dark fleece. All right, we're starting to get there on this. What a beautiful, beautiful fleece. All right, and this one is actually ready. It's ready to be pulled out. So what I'm going to do is, this was very, very clean. So I'm going to pour this clean rinse water back into my hot water just because, once again, if you're off grid, you want to save water. If it's not dirty, don't just throw it out. All right. So again, this is my strainer that I only use for this. Darlene, what is the name of the dye you use? It's called Greener Shades, and if you purchase it through our Etsy store, we really appreciate the support. And it should be under website on our Facebook page, but it's, if you look up Dirtpatcheaven with 1H on Etsy, you will find it there, and we do have the full kit that is 9 dyes. All right, so I don't mind getting water on the floor in here because it is my my summer kitchen, and I actually kind of would prefer that my floor was a little damp instead of too dry, just because I would prefer to have the mulch underneath the floorboard be damp in case we ever had a match dropped when I'm lighting a propane stove or something. So I do let the water run out onto the floor without worrying about it. So this, running out of counter space. Hey Cassie, so this is my beautiful clean fiber at this point. And I will show you how I'm going to dehydrate it in an herb dehydrator, or I'm going to dry it in an herb dehydrator here in a second. So now I have this, and it's actually a little tiny bit cloudy, so I might, yeah, I think I am. I'm going to mix it because I need some hotter water for this anyway when I pull it out. All right, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to relight the stove. I'm going to relight the stove so that it can be heating up for the dyeing process. Hey, thanks Sandra, I appreciate it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and relight it, which means I need to open it back up. This is not an expensive stove. I got it free from my father-in-law. And it doesn't have an up and a down. There's no up and down temperature. It's just on or off. So I have my 5-gallon. I have my 5-gallon water here. I'll try and show it to you really quick. Can you guys see that? So that I'm not having to run in and out of the house. Like that. And I'm going to go ahead and fill, this pot back up so that I can use that water to dye. And I'm going to let it heat up to the same temperature as what my rinse water is. Try and make sure I have you guys follow me every time. Oh, Susie says she learned how to spin from a video I did on drop spindles. Hey, how are you? All right, so I'm going to add more water to this. And just in case there's a fluke, I'm not going to add my citric acid or my vinegar yet. Turn that down just a little bit because it's getting kind of stinky. Okay, that's super hot. All right, so what I'm tempted to do, because it really does matter if it's clean, I think what I'm going to do, just because it is mohair, I'm really tempted just to add more soap to the rinse water and wash it one more time. Ow, it's so hot. Whenever I wash mohair, I always wish I had gloves because you have to get it so hot. And you want it to stay hot. And so it's just miserably hot. Just really hurts. I like to strain this a little better, hence my strainer. And this is really dirty, so I'm just tempted to pour it out on the floor. Really tempted to. All right, you guys want to watch and see how it's done by a pro? Because I'm not the kind of person who worries a lot about details. Okay, so the only thing in this water is soap, grease, and dirt. It won't hurt my soil. Wow, it has a lot of dirt. It won't hurt my soil, it won't hurt my plants. All right. And now you can see why if you try to stick your whole fleece in the bathtub, it might be a bad idea. This is a very small amount of fleece, and you can see how dirty it is and how much time it takes to get it clean. All right, so that's the dregs at the bottom. And this is why we made the floor with big slats, is because we do a lot out here with cleaning, a lot out here with water, and we want to just be able to let it go through. All right, so I'm gonna look at this really quick and see if I think that it could use some more soap. I'm gonna pour some of it in here. And I just want to look at it, see what I think. I'm really tempted just to. So I'm tempted, so I'm gonna. That's equally hot. I'm gonna stir it a little bit. Just because a lot of times with mohair it can be deceiving. So hot. All right, so I'm gonna transition for a second and let that sit. Okay, this is what I'm gonna use. It is an old drying rack for herbs, and I forgot. I was really sick when I left last year, very sick, and so I didn't get it brought in. So I'm going to put my fleece that I know is already washed in here on these trays, and the way you want to load it is whites on top, then natural colored fleeces, and then on the bottom you want your strong dyes. If you're going to dye something really strong, have it be on the bottom racks with the strongest color being on the bottom. Lighter colors on the top, stronger colors on the bottom. Because as the water drips, you're going to have dyes dripping down and through. And if you have some that you want to stay white or some that's lighter than the other, you want them to stay at the top. Dark dyes on the bottom, because then if there is drippage, it won't matter. So I'm going to leave that there to dry. And now I'm going to think a little harder about how to get this fleece out without burning my hands off. All right. I don't want to waste the water, but I don't want to touch it because it's super hot. So that's how I did it. I'm going to put it in here for another good wash with some soap. And if you don't get all the grease out, if you don't get all the lanolin out, you have to rewash it later after it's dry, because when it's wet, when you're finished, when it's wet, you really can't see well enough, because it's when you have dry fleece and you pull it apart that you can see whether or not you got all the grease and all the lanolin out. That's what your indicator is. And mohair can be super, super cranky about letting it out. So, just gonna put a little bit more in, and then I'm actually gonna pour this back in. And the dirty stuff at the bottom that had more dirt in it, I'm gonna dump it out. Because what we're really working on getting out right now is grease, not necessarily dirt, but grease. Grease and, or lanolin, depending on what it is you're washing, not watching. So having that little bit of dirt in there doesn't hurt anything, but this now means that I need to take this and fill it up with water so that I can put more boiling water in it for the last rinse. And sometimes with a really greasy fleece, you have 4 or 5 rinses. These ones that I'm showing you here are really clean. Okay, that's as much cold water as I can risk so that it doesn't felt. And now I have to add my boiling water back in as soon as my mohair has sat for a minute. Another nice reason to use this kind of herb dehydrator is that it has a screen on it. So if you have a local problem with some kind of moth, it'll keep the moths out. And if you have wool that has moths in it, if you dye it and you're boiling it, it kills the moths, at which point, if you dry it in a safe place that has a screen, you now have wool moth-free wool. All right, that is still super, super hot. So I'm gonna let it sit until it cools down just a little bit, and to allow my boiling water to heat up. All right, so just so you guys know, over on Fiber Flirtations, we have more wool type videos. We have Sandra Clark as a contributor. We have Nikki from Wiggle Sticks and myself. And we haven't had Catherine on recently, but we probably will soon. Hey Barbara, how are you? It's good to see you. And so, if you're more into fiber than you are into homesteading stuff, that's where you can find us. We're going to have Sandra Clark here demonstrating things like maybe sprouting, apartment homesteading, that kind of thing soon. And generally she's available on Tuesday, so that's kind of when we're thinking we'll do that. And hopefully you guys have enjoyed having multiple people coming in as much as we have. All right. Now, if I went from hot to cold, it would felt it. Just completely felt it. So, I'm going to bring it up to temperature. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is once again, I'm going to mix the waters, the hot and the cold, to bring this temperature up. Oh, it's so stinky. Yeah, that's better. Very hot. All right, so that's ready to rinse now. And making sure this isn't going to crack on me. Not too hot. I'm going to put my cold water in and fill that back up. Barbara said it's really hot there. And here, we had cold weather this morning, so I am wearing a sweater. But I'm also in the summer kitchen, which is right underneath our crabapple tree. And so it is always cool under here. I highly recommend a summer kitchen. This used to be the gazebo. There used to be a hot tub in here. And so we made use of the fact that we had a deck that was way too big, and we took some of the lumber off the deck and we walled in the gazebo. And mainly we did it so that we had somewhere to hang pork when we had a butchered pork, and somewhere to smoke and cure our, somewhere to smoke and cure our homestead livestock. All right, so that's warm. This has come down in temperature quite a bit, and we're still getting quite a bit of dirt out of it. One of the reasons to stoke it is because it allows the soap to really go to work on the grease. If you plunk it in, move it around a little bit, and then don't let it sit, you're wasting your soap. So there we go. We're getting closer all the time. And again, small batches. It lets you learn as you go. And I think we should be super, super close with this. Hey kiddo, how's it going? Do you have the cage totally taken apart?
There's something holding it up that I can't figure out.
Okay, then go stare at it until you can figure it out. All right. So, hot. I kind of want to let this just drain on the floor somewhere. All right, I'm going to let that drain for just a second. I'm going to pour out my dirty water. All right, so I do love these strainers. I use them in my kitchen. I use them for my washing of the wool. I use them for dyeing. I have two separate ones so that there's not cross contamination. I kind of want to see how this, and the funny thing is, if you see how I'm working with this, every fleece is different. The way you wash every fleece is going to be different, because you'll notice things about it as you're doing like I said, a small batch. When you're doing a small batch, it gives you a chance to learn your fleece. And if it's felting too easily, or if there's some other thing that's happening with it that you don't like, it gives you that chance to do better. All right, so I think, let's see, I'm gonna dump that out and see what the color is. Barbara said, you're a great mom to your girls. You're moving into the house, your last YouTube, it looks like. We still don't really know what we're doing. We still have work to do on the house. I'm using all the tools and all the things I built before we left. That's pretty clear. If, however, I had taken my dirty fleece that I thought was squeezed out pretty well and just put it in here, then all that dirt that was still kind of settled in it would have now got on my clean rinsing water. So now, I can get the rest of that out and still have really clean rinse water. You want really clean rinse water when you're finished. So that's actually finished. And I could use that water for something else. I could use it to water the garden if I wanted to. That one's trying to come up to a boil, and it makes me sick thinking of throwing this water away. I am so weird. Alright, so what I could do is turn the stove off and dye on a different day and just play with this as a natural fleece first, which I'm kind of tempted to do. The other nice thing about having the summer kitchen for this is that the slats are open enough that it protects the stove from the wind so the propane doesn't get blown out, but I don't get too hot either from cooking. So I'm kind of tempted just to let it be. I'm almost tempted also to wash it one more time. You can get a little OCD with it. See what time we are. 10:32. Okay. Well, I kind of think that that's what I want to do, is just hang it and let today's show just be about that. Just about washing, so that next time you guys can see, and I can do a more comprehensive video about just the dyeing. So here we go. Just gonna open it up a little bit. And it'll stay cool in here, but it'll be able to drip, and it will be perfect. All right. Okay, so I guess that's our show for today. That particular bowl is strictly for dyeing. This is strictly for dyeing. And so I'm going to put it somewhere that I won't be mistaking it for food prep. This is still pretty clean. This is my dishwashing bowl for in the house, so I'm going to sterilize it before I use it for cooking again. And this is a spoon that is used for dyeing. Thanks, Sandra. Okay, I'm going to stand up my water so that it isn't leaking, so I can save some of it. Sometime before I come out and work again, I will fill that gallon jug, the 5-gallon jug, back up. I'm going to turn this off and close my propane. I can smell the propane enough that I'm a little concerned about that. Another good reason why open air cooking, doing this, is great. But I do have a camp chef that I'd rather have out here, but it's over to be used in the Airbnb by the people who are going to be renting at the Airbnb. So, not sure what I think about that. All right. Glad you liked the show, Julie. I appreciate it. So, I'm going to look around, make sure that I don't have anything here that needs to go out to the cabin. I'm going to take my dyes inside. I'm going to leave the citric acid out here. You also use citric acid when making laundry soap. And I'm going to leave my wool shampoo out here and my dyeing wool shampoo out here because I don't wash it in the house anymore. I did before I learned better. And if we're not allowed to make mistakes when we're young and foolish and can't find that information on the internet, then what's it all about? All right, so I got my jug here. I'm actually going to turn it upside down. And this is just an old sewing table that I use to protect the wood. I'll leave this here because I haven't been using it out at the cabin very much because we're doing other things. What else do I need to clean up? I've got that. This pot that I have on the propane, that's only for dyeing. I don't use it for anything else, so it's safe to stay out here with water in it. Here's my white vinegar and my cotton dyeing stuff that I haven't used in years. And I think we're good. Okay, so if you guys are interested in the combs or the dyes, I'm also trying to get up some of that gorgeous wool onto the Etsy store. I don't have it up yet because we did want to find out how well the white dyed, and Catherine is doing that on her side. She's over on Dirtpatcheaven Homestead. Hey Pam, how are you? And so that's kind of where we are right now. I'm going to take the rest of everything out. I believe that I got the inside of this bag wet a little bit with my hand, so I don't want to close that yet. And thanks for popping in, and we will talk to you later.